The economy is still in recovery mode. The pandemic is still raging, and Donald Trump is struggling.
The highest disapproval
on the economy through the course of the summer.
But what are Trump's chances in November? Because when it comes to re-election campaigns, only a handful of presidents have succeeded to 2 terms. So what makes a one-term president? And will Donald Trump become the latest to join the club? Of the 44 men who have served as president, only 14 have completed 2 terms. We tend to think a one-termer is rare because all 3 of the last presidents have all served a second term. But believe it or not, this trend of 3 presidents serving 2 terms has happened only once before. John Adams was the first to lose a re-election. I spoke to Barbara Perry, a presidential scholar at the University of Virginia's Miller Center. She breaks down the biggest reasons for Adams' failure to win a second term.
Because there was such partisanship and such animosity between the 2 factions of Federalist and Democratic Republicans led by Thomas Jefferson, that John Adams cracked down a lot on the press and on immigrants, on anybody who would speak out against his Federalist government.
Sound familiar? One can argue the strong parallels with Adams probably means Trump's presidency could be one term, but that really isn't enough to predict the outcome of this year's election.
Can you tell me what you think are the issues that take a role when it comes to one-term presidents?
If the president's poll ratings and approval ratings are dropping, it's not a cause necessarily of his losing, but it's a sign that he may lose. What are the causes then of that? It's usually some kind of crisis that's happened in the country.
With gratitude and with determination, I accept your nomination.
Look at Jimmy Carter's poll numbers from inauguration through the end of his presidency. He reached a high approval rating of 75% at the start of his term in March 1977. But over time, his approval rating dropped to 31% in November 1980. And his disapproval ratings from the election were in the mid-50s. In the election, Ronald Reagan won the Electoral College vote by a landslide, with 489 to Carter's 49. To understand what went wrong in Carter's presidency, I spoke with historian Alice O'Connor, an expert in the politics of economic crises.
Re-election is certainly an expression of a vote of confidence, not just specifically in the way the economy is doing, which has historically been a really important factor, but also a sense that this is somebody that we can trust.
After the Iran-Iraq War and the Iranian Revolution, inflation rates averaged around 12% around the time of the election, and the country fell into a recession with unemployment at almost 8%.
The administration was veering all over the place in its response, and its attempt to get inflation under control was really important in this sense of erosion of confidence.
Because of the Iranian hostage crisis, Carter treated himself as a wartime president and suspended political campaigning. Instead, he opted for the Rose Garden strategy, much like Trump, using the White House as a campaign backdrop. Though Trump has continued to travel to rallies. The Republican Party had to present a very sharp contrast to what Carter's record had to offer. Someone who had a bold vision of American economic greatness.
Are you better off than you were 4 years ago?
He was a conservative, but he was also a former Hollywood actor. And he was called the great communicator. And Jimmy Carter wasn't the best communicator, and he also didn't handle the press very well. So you put all those things together and it leads to a landslide victory.
We are going to go out and win one for the Gipper, and November, that's the one it's going to be.
12 years later, after Carter's defeat, another incumbent faces his same fate, George H.W. Bush. In March 1991, Bush reached a historically high approval rating, peaking at 86%. But by the time of the election, it had dropped into the low 30s. And just as Carter, Bush's disapproval rating stood in the mid-50s. In the election, Bill Clinton managed to swipe the Electoral College with 370 to 168. Bush was elected in 1988, promising to continue the Reagan train. So what happened?
Read my lips. No new taxes.
He didn't keep his word. Inheriting a massive budget deficit from Reagan, he had no other alternative but to raise taxes. And by 1991, the country crashed into a recession, with the unemployment rate peaking at 7.7% in 1992.
his betrayal of that promise, played a big role in undermining the support he had within his own party. This administration is not going to protect the things that Americans hold dear. We need some kind of a change.
And that change was Bill Clinton. Similar to Reagan in 1980, he presented himself as a candidate with a difference to the current administration.
It is because we are in the grip of a failed economic theory. And this decision you're about to make better be about what kind of economic theory you want.
Now, if we take a look at this year's race, Trump seems to be in a similar situation to Carter and Bush in one aspect: the economy. The pandemic practically turned the economy on its head. After the shutdown, unemployment shot up to 14.7% in April. Trump's approval ratings have never soared since coming into office, but his disapproval rating is around where it was for both Carter and Bush before the re-election.
If a president is running for re-election a second term, then the election is going to be a referendum on how he conducts himself in the presidency. And has he attacked crises well and effectively? Is the economy going well? Are we at peace?
For Trump, he has an economic collapse, racial unrest, and has developed a credibility gap. But he's also an unprecedented president, running for a re-election in an unprecedented time. 2020 might not be 2016, but don't count Trump out just yet.
Because he has overturned and upset and crashed through and broken so many norms of the presidency, I don't know whether in the presidency itself we'll ever get those back. And I doubt that we'll ever get the norms of running for election or re-election back again.